My neighbor knocked at my door and said, "Man, I don't want trouble, but your fiancé was in my garage last night. With someone else." I asked who. He just pointed at. I remember the sound of the knock more than anything else. 3 short thuds, nervous, uneven, like someone rehearsed courage on the walk over and lost most of it at my doorstep. It was late enough for the street to be quiet, but not late enough for a social call. I had just finished washing dishes and was drying my hands when I opened the door. Reuben Tate, the neighbor with the constant sunburn and the perpetual apologetic expression, stood there shifting from foot to foot. His truck keys dangled in his hand the way guilty kids hold stolen candy. He didn't glance at me at first. He looked past me, at my living room, as if checking whether someone else stood inside. Then he swallowed hard and said this strange line that rearranged my entire night. He didn't want trouble, but my fiancée had been in his garage last night. The words sounded like he practiced them in his truck, but still hated saying them out loud. Sabrina wasn't home. She said she was at her late study session, something she had been doing more frequently. I didn't think twice about it until now. When Reuben mentioned she wasn't alone, the back of my neck tightened. I asked him who she was with, and he didn't answer directly. He lifted his hand instead and pointed across the street. That house belonged to Calder Reese. Calder lived 2 houses down, on the opposite side of the street, the sort of guy who always looked like he was on the verge of landing a job he didn't deserve. Sabrina mentioned him once or twice as a coworker who hovered too much. I had no reason to suspect anything. At least, I didn't until Reuben stepped backward, making space on the porch as if expecting me to move past him. I didn't say anything. I walked by him, crossed the street, and headed for Calder's driveway. The wind wasn't strong, but it felt cold. I didn't text Sabrina. I didn't call her. I didn't even check if her car was around. My legs took me straight toward a confrontation that felt overdue even though I didn't yet know why. Calder's garage was half open, the way people leave it when they plan to come back soon. A dim bulb glowed above tool racks and cluttered shelves. When I stepped inside, the smell hit me first. Wine, cheap cologne, something floral. I turned my head and saw 2 glasses on a crate. One had lipstick on the rim. In the corner, a blanket lay bunched up like someone kicked it aside in a hurry. Calder appeared from behind a shelf so fast he nearly tripped over a toolbox. He wasn't expecting anyone. His face drained the moment he saw me. He muttered something under his breath and reached for a box, as if he planned to hide behind it or pretend he was busy organizing his tools. He didn't get far. His hand slipped on a canister, and the crash echoed through the garage. A hammer hit the concrete, followed by a wrench. The noise was loud enough to pull lights on in 2 nearby porches. Calder winced and backed up like a cornered animal. My pulse climbed, not because I intended to attack him, but because the atmosphere carried the same weight as the moment before a serious storm. I asked him why Sabrina was here. The words came out even, almost too calm. Calm can be more dangerous than shouting, and Calder knew it. His hands trembled. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook it again. He tried to say something that sounded halfway like denial and halfway like a confession. Before he could get a coherent sentence out, I heard footsteps. Fast ones. The kind that come from someone who heard too much. Sabrina appeared at the entrance, breathing hard, hair in disarray, cheeks flushed. She looked from me to Calder and back, as if searching for an explanation that could hold the weight of her panic. She moved toward me, hands slightly raised, insisting I was misunderstanding everything. Her tone had rehearsed calm, but her eyes told a different story. They scanned the garage, catching the glasses, the blanket, Calder's scattered tools, and the look on his face. She tried collecting details before I asked questions. She attempted to shift the situation, saying she was here to help Calder with a personal problem he didn't want to discuss publicly. Her explanation carried the shape of an excuse, but none of the substance. She stepped closer, and I stepped back. I didn't trust my voice yet. Then someone else entered the chaos. A small car pulled into the driveway. The headlights swept through the garage and froze on the scene inside. The door opened, and Tanya Myers climbed out. Tanya was Calder's girlfriend. She worked long late shifts and usually returned home exhausted, dragging her backpack behind her. Tonight she showed up earlier than usual, and the timing could not have been worse for anyone inside that garage. She didn't ask questions. She took in the wine glasses, the blanket, Sabrina's stance, Calder's guilt, and my expression in one slow sweep. Her shoulders tensed, but her voice stayed controlled. She asked Calder how many weeks this had been happening. I wasn't aware of weeks. Weeks implied more than a moment of weakness. Weeks implied a pattern. Calder's face confirmed everything Tanya suspected. She didn't wait for his answer. She walked straight to Sabrina with the sort of precision only someone who has already processed betrayal can achieve. She told me plainly that Sabrina started showing up shortly after my night shifts began. Not once. Not twice. Multiple times. She added that Calder told her Sabrina had been helping him deal with stress. That lie was familiar. People use it when they don't want to admit the real reason someone keeps visiting them at night. Reuben approached the driveway cautiously, drawn by the sounds and the raised voices. His presence shifted the balance completely. He told Tanya he heard laughter from Calder's garage 2 nights earlier, but assumed it was just neighbors having a drink. He didn't expect it to involve me or Sabrina. Sabrina tried redirecting blame again, claiming she only came over to talk because Calder was struggling. Her words didn't match the scene, the timing, or her expression. Tanya pointed out the blanket on the floor, the wine glasses, and the pattern of nighttime visits. She asked why Sabrina never came during the day if this was so innocent. Sabrina had no answer. Her silence did more damage than any admission. Reuben apologized repeatedly, saying he should have told me sooner. He believed it wasn't his place to interfere. His voice cracked when he mentioned seeing someone else with Sabrina on one occasion. Someone taller, someone wearing a jacket with a distinct emblem. He assumed it was another coworker. When he said that, Sabrina flinched so sharply it broke her facade. The tension thickened. Calder stood frozen. Tanya trembled with controlled anger, and Sabrina's eyes darted between all of us like a person searching for the least damaging escape route. I said nothing because I didn't trust myself to speak without triggering a chain reaction none of us could predict. Tanya turned to me and told me something that felt like a final blow. Sabrina wasn't here by accident. She had been using Calder's garage as a safe place whenever she didn't want to be at home. She said Calder admitted that much during one of their arguments. She also mentioned a second man, someone she didn't know, someone Sabrina supposedly confided in as well. This was the moment everything tilted. I walked out of the garage without raising my voice or demanding answers. Too much was being revealed too quickly, and the air felt heavy with all the half-truths that suddenly made sense in a single night. Behind me, Tanya kept yelling. Sabrina followed me out, calling my name, but she didn't come close enough to touch me. Reuben stood on his driveway with his hands on his head. Calder remained in his garage, unable to face either woman. The night felt colder than before, and the distance between me and Sabrina had grown wider than the entire street. This was only the beginning, and the worst part was knowing something else had been happening behind my back long before tonight's revelations. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp off, staring at the wall as the hours stacked up like bricks. The house felt too quiet, too hollow, as if the truth leaked into the walls and drained all the warmth out. Sabrina walked in near midnight, paused at the doorway when she saw me awake, then stepped inside with that practiced calm she used whenever she tried to steer a situation back into her control. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't apologize. She sat down on the chair opposite me and launched into an explanation that stretched in every direction except the one that mattered. She insisted nothing physical happened with Calder. She said she went to his garage only because he was struggling with personal issues. She said Tanya misunderstood everything. She changed details every few minutes and never noticed the contradictions piling around her. I let her talk because silence made her more uncomfortable than confrontation. She kept insisting I needed to trust her, yet she couldn't explain why she hid the garage visits, why she deleted certain messages on her phone, why she looked so terrified when Reuben mentioned the second man. She stumbled when she claimed she was only there once. She accidentally described the layout of Calder's garage in a way someone would only know after several visits. When she finally realized her explanations were unraveling, she shifted blame. She said I was neglecting her. She said my night shifts made her feel lonely. She said Calder listened more than I did. She said Tanya exaggerated things because their relationship was falling apart. The excuses came out too fast, stacked on top of each other like someone emptying a drawer without checking what was inside. The sun began to rise, and she grew frustrated when she realized nothing she said landed the way she hoped. She slammed the bathroom door, stayed inside far longer than needed, and then left for work without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't yell. I didn't ask her for the truth again. But the night had planted too many new questions, and they followed me like shadows. Later that morning, Tanya texted me, asking if I wanted to hear everything she knew. I didn't reply immediately. I hesitated because I didn't want to fall into detective territory. But this wasn't detective work. This was self-defense. I walked across the street to Tanya's house. She opened the door with swollen eyes, makeup smudged, hair tied in a loose knot like she hadn't slept either. She motioned me inside without speaking. We sat in her living room, each on opposite sides of the coffee table. She looked exhausted but determined to make sure I understood what had been happening behind my back. She recounted the first time she noticed Sabrina at their place. She came home early one evening, and Sabrina was in the garage with Calder, talking in low voices. The second time was late at night during a thunderstorm. She said Calder insisted Sabrina needed a place to decompress. Tanya confronted them, and Sabrina apologized while Calder insisted it was harmless. Tanya had believed him back then. Then she said something that made the room feel smaller. Sabrina didn't always come alone. There was another man, someone she didn't know by name. She described him as tall, wearing a motorcycle jacket with a silver emblem on the back. He showed up once in the middle of the night and stayed almost an hour. Tanya admitted she didn't see his face, only his build and the jacket. She assumed he was another co-worker Sabrina confided in. Sabrina never mentioned him to me. Not once. The room stayed quiet after that. The air felt thick, like invisible dust settling on both of us. Tanya's hands shook when she finally asked if I had noticed any missing items or unusual schedule changes. I shrugged, unsure. Nothing seemed out of place in my house, but the previous night already proved I wasn't paying as much attention as I thought. When I got home, I checked the small drawer in the hallway where I kept spare keys. One was missing, a silver one with a chipped edge. I stared at the empty space for a long moment before closing the drawer. I didn't call Sabrina to ask about it. I didn't trust anything she would say. I thought things couldn't twist any further until the next visitor showed up that afternoon. Sabrina's sister, Liana. She arrived without warning, knocking on the door with enough urgency to make me expect an emergency. She walked in the moment I opened it, eyes wide, voice trembling as she asked what happened between me and Sabrina. I could tell she wasn't there to defend her sister. She looked conflicted, nervous, like she was choosing which version of events to reveal. She told me Sabrina came to her earlier, crying, claiming I blew everything out of proportion. But Liana knew something was off because Sabrina mentioned details she shouldn't have known from last night unless she had been there longer than she admitted. Liana slipped during the conversation and revealed something Sabrina told her months ago. She wasn't sure about the wedding. She said Sabrina had been thinking about a backup plan in case things didn't go the way she wanted. A backup plan. The phrase stayed in my stomach like a stone. Liana regretted saying it the moment it left her mouth. She covered her face with her hands and apologized. She didn't want to get involved in someone else's relationship, especially not her sister's, but she couldn't ignore the fact that Sabrina was hiding things from everyone, including her own family. She left soon after. She didn't defend Sabrina. She didn't attack me. She left in silent confusion, which was more telling than any justification she could have offered. I sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the floor, replaying every moment from the last 3 months. The missed calls, the deleted texts, the nights she returned home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. The days she claimed extra hours at work despite her hospital not allowing overtime without approval. The tension in her shoulders whenever someone mentioned her coworkers. The puzzle pieces didn't align by accident. They fit too neatly, too cleanly. The day seemed to pause until my phone buzzed. An unknown number. No profile picture. One message. Check your backyard camera. You missed something. The words didn't sound like a prank. They carried a deliberate weight, as if the sender knew exactly what I needed to see. My stomach tightened as I stood and walked toward the device synced to the security camera feed. I opened the footage, scrolled to the date stamped 2 weeks earlier. Midnight. Rain. And the moment the screen loaded, I stopped breathing. There she was, Sabrina, walking through the side gate. And behind her, a man in a motorcycle jacket with a silver emblem. She wasn't guiding him in. She wasn't comforting him. She wasn't offering him some emotional support about work. She was unlocking the back door for him with the missing spare key. My hand stayed frozen above the screen, because I recognized the emblem on the jacket, and the stride, and the posture. The second man wasn't some coworker. He wasn't a stranger. It was my cousin, Rainer. Rainer's face filling the corner of that grainy backyard video didn't feel real at first. It felt staged, like I stumbled onto some bizarre reenactment instead of my actual life. I replayed the clip 3 times just to make sure my eyes weren't distorting the shapes in the dark. But there he was, clear as daylight once the sensor light flicked on behind them. The same jacket he always bragged about. The same silver emblem he bought custom. A patch shaped like a wing blade. The image of him walking behind Sabrina was sharper than any memory I had of him in the last few years. We hadn't spoken much since our falling out. He owed me money. He crashed my old car and refused responsibility. He vanished for months, then reappeared only to ask for favors. Yet none of those past conflicts prepared me for this. I paused the video. The timestamp held steady. Midnight. Rain. 2 weeks ago. Sabrina unlocking the back door. Rainer ducking his head as he followed her inside, like someone who had been there before. I didn't rage. I didn't panic. My mind simply narrowed into one clear point. I had to talk to him. I grabbed my keys, locked the house, and drove straight to the small duplex he rented near the edge of town. The place always looked abandoned. Overgrown lawn. Broken blinds. Old mail stuffed in the box. His motorcycle stood outside, leaning slightly as if the kickstand never fully locked. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, louder. The door opened mid-knock. Rainer stepped out with the casual confidence of someone expecting a delivery, not a confrontation. He smelled like gasoline, cigarettes, and that cheap mint spray he used instead of showering. He asked what I wanted. His tone wasn't defensive. It was bored, like he already knew why I was there and had rehearsed a reaction that required no effort. I asked him directly about the night in the video. I asked why he was at my house. I asked why he was with Sabrina. He stared at me for a long moment, then broke into a smirk. Not an answer. Not an apology. A smirk. He stepped closer, leaned against the doorframe, and let out a short laugh. His entire posture said he wasn't going to give me anything. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He let ambiguity do the damage because it gave him more power. I didn't push further. I knew continuing the confrontation here would only end with him twisting the situation or provoking me into making a mistake. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. But the universe didn't let the situation cool. That night, around 10, someone pounded on my door. The rhythm wasn't nervous like Ruben's knock had been. It was aggressive, deliberate, like someone announcing an interruption rather than requesting an entrance. When I opened the door, 2 police officers stood on the porch. Their flashlights were off, but their hands rested near their belts. They asked for me by name. They asked about an altercation earlier that day. They asked if I had threatened Rainer. I blinked at them because the absurdity didn't register immediately. They mentioned a report. A statement filed by Rainer claiming I confronted him violently, threatened to attack him, and stalked him afterward. According to him, he feared for his safety. It took me a second to speak. I explained everything calmly. I told them I confronted him. Yes, but there was no violence, no threats, nothing resembling what he described. They nodded slowly, watching my face, assessing the tension in my posture, evaluating whether I fit the profile of someone unstable. Then Sabrina walked into the frame behind me. She stood on the staircase, pretending to be startled, pretending she had no idea what was going on, pretending she was concerned. She put on a voice she used only in public situations, soft, fragile, uncertain. She told the officers I had been upset lately, that I was having trouble handling stress, that maybe I said things without meaning them. Her words sliced the air more sharply than anything Rainer could invent. The officers exchanged a look. They asked me to step outside so they could get a clearer picture. I complied. While I spoke to one officer, Sabrina kept whispering to the other, brushing hair behind her ear, acting embarrassed, playing the part of the worried fiancé who couldn't stop a volatile partner. I watched the scene unfold with a calm that felt surreal. It didn't matter how convincing she tried to be. Her performance cracked the moment Ruben burst out from his house across the street. He called out to the officers, telling them Sabrina had been sneaking around with men in garages. He said he witnessed her entering Calder's property multiple nights. He said he tried to warn me sooner. He spoke quickly, clearly, with no hesitation. Then Tanya stepped onto her porch and backed him up. She added details. She described Sabrina's behavior in her garage. She mentioned the second man. She mentioned Sabrina's inconsistencies. She repeated everything she told me earlier that morning. The officer's posture shifted entirely. Their questions turned sharper, but not toward me. They asked Sabrina why she hadn't mentioned the possibility that her fiancé was reacting to her dishonesty rather than some unprovoked aggression. Sabrina fumbled, claimed people were exaggerating, said Tanya hated her, said Ruben misinterpreted things. The officers weren't buying it. One officer asked Sabrina directly whether she was involved with Rainer or Calder. She refused to answer. Her silence lasted too long. The officer didn't need a confession. He only needed the hesitation to doubt the credibility of Rainer's report. They asked to speak with Rainer by phone. He didn't answer. They tried again. Nothing. They made a note, closed the conversation, and told me they would not proceed with the report based on the conflicting information and unreliable statements. When the officers left, the street remained silent, but the damage was already done. Sabrina turned to me, eyes wide, voice trembling with outrage rather than remorse. She accused me of ruining her reputation with the neighbors. She accused Tanya of exaggerating. She accused Ruben of spying. She refused to acknowledge the missing key, the garage visits, the backyard footage. Instead of explaining or apologizing, she grabbed a backpack from the hallway closet, stuffed several items into it, and stormed out of the house. She didn't tell me where she was going. She didn't tell me if she was coming back. She just left with the same frantic energy of someone fleeing a collapsing building. I followed her from a distance. Not as a detective, not out of curiosity, but because something told me she wasn't going to meet a friend or drive around aimlessly to cool off. She drove for 20 minutes, weaving through side streets, as if trying to throw off anyone who might be watching. Then she pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel with flickering neon lights and a half-empty lot. She parked near the back, got out quickly, and rushed toward one of the rooms. I watched from inside my car. 5 minutes later, Calder arrived. He parked 2 spots away from her. He entered the same motel room. 10 minutes after that, Raynor pulled in, still limping slightly from the earlier crash I hadn't heard about yet. He glanced around, then approached the same door, knocking twice. She opened it. For both of them. And the night didn't end there. Because the Real explosion was waiting inside that motel room. I stayed in the car with the engine off and the window cracked just enough to breathe. The motel's neon sign flickered in irregular pulses, casting harsh light on the cracked pavement. Doors opened and closed along the walkway, each noise sharper than it should have been. Every passing second carved deeper grooves into the night. Calder was already inside the room. Raynor had gone in 2 minutes later. Sabrina stood in the doorway for a moment before pulling it shut behind them. The image lingered in my mind. Her turning her back to the parking lot, her silhouette framed by cheap yellow bulbs, 2 men stepping into the room behind her as if this had all been choreographed long before I arrived. I wasn't there to break in or shout or make an ugly scene. I just needed the truth to finish forming. The last 24 hours felt like a book finally flipping to the page that explained everything, and all I had to do was let the ink settle. I went inside the lobby and approached the front desk, where a tired-looking clerk leaned over the counter scrolling through his phone. He barely lifted his eyes when I asked if a woman named Sabrina checked in recently. I didn't give him her last name. I didn't need to. He recognized her immediately. He said she came often. He said she always used a variation of her maiden name, never the same spelling twice. He said she usually arrived late and left quickly, always in a hurry. He wasn't gossiping. He wasn't malicious. He spoke with the casual indifference of someone who had seen too many affairs and too many collapsing lives in this place to be shocked by another. I thanked him, stepped outside, and leaned against the wall beneath the dim security camera. I didn't feel anger or heartbreak or any version of emotional collapse. I felt clarity, the kind people only experience when the noise disappears for the first time in months. I waited. Calder came out first. He emerged with his shirt half untucked and his expression twisted between guilt and confusion. He stopped when he noticed me standing near the staircase. His mouth opened slightly, but he said nothing because he didn't have a script for this moment. He wanted to walk past me, but he froze as if his legs no longer trusted him. He stepped aside, mumbling something he probably intended to sound apologetic, but the words had no weight. Before he could move another step, the door opened behind him. Raynor stepped out next. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy adjusting his jacket, rubbing his knee, complaining under his breath about the motel stairs. When his eyes finally met mine, he didn't flinch. He just squared his shoulders and let out a long exhale, as though accepting a consequence he had already calculated. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to provoke me like earlier. He simply muttered that things got complicated and turned away. That was his version of closure. But the door behind them hadn't finished revealing its secrets. A third knock sounded from inside. A low, impatient knock. Then another. The door swung open again. A third man stepped inside the frame. Taller than Calder. Broader than Raynor, wearing a motorcycle jacket with a different emblem, not the winged blade I recognized, but something newer, cleaner, professionally embroidered. He held a helmet under his arm and called Sabrina by a nickname I had never heard in my life. A soft, shortened version of her maiden name. Something intimate. Something practiced. This was the third man Tanya had mentioned. The real motorcycle guy. The one who appeared weeks before Raynor ever got involved. His sudden presence snapped the last piece of the puzzle into place. For the first time since the night began, Sabrina showed her real expression. Not panic, not guilt, not outrage. Just the stunned realization that every secret she balanced had collapsed in the same room at the same moment. She wasn't in control anymore. She wasn't managing anything. She was surrounded by the very people she tried to keep separate. The third man looked from Sabrina to Calder, then to Raynor, then finally to me, standing at a distance. His face twisted with the slow comprehension of someone who just discovered he wasn't the only one she was meeting. A shouting match erupted inside the room between the men. Each demanded explanations. Each accused the other. Sabrina tried to insert herself between them, but every sentence she attempted dissolved under the weight of her own contradictions. Calder brought up nights. She claimed she was at work. Raynor mentioned weekends. She said she was visiting family. The third man listed messages she sent him while she was supposedly comforting Calder. Her entire web tangled until it collapsed entirely. I didn't walk toward the chaos. I didn't want any of them to think I still had something to lose in that room. I simply stepped forward enough to be heard and said I was ending the engagement. No performance. No drama. No accusations. Just a factual decision delivered with the same composure I wished I had felt months ago. Sabrina rushed out of the room, insisting things weren't as they looked. She tried reaching for me, but her voice shook in a way that made even her own arguments sound hollow. Her explanations had collapsed under too much evidence. There was nothing left for her to reshape. She tried mentioning stress, loneliness, confusion, emotional mistakes, but none of it mattered. The truth was already out in the open, witnessed by 3 different men who were strangers to one another until tonight. I walked away. I didn't need the motel clerk. I didn't need the neighbors. I didn't need more proof. The proof had assembled itself in front of me like actors walking onto a stage without realizing the audience had already filled the seats. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Calder tried to return home to Tanya, but she packed his things in black trash bags and placed them on the lawn. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply listed every lie he told her and said she wouldn't live with someone who dragged her into another woman's mess. Rayner tried to dodge responsibility by disappearing for a week, but the police eventually found him. He had outstanding fines, violated a probation requirement, and faced repercussions for filing a false report. His arrest wasn't dramatic. He was pulled over during a routine patrol, and everything caught up to him at once. The third man blocked Sabrina's number. He didn't want explanations. Once he learned he wasn't the only one, he moved on quickly, which probably stung her more than anything I ever said. Sabrina tried to return to our home, but I changed the locks. I left her a note inside a box of her belongings. No insults, no analysis, just the intact engagement ring and the house key she never returned. Her family called me, demanding an explanation. They accused me of abandoning her. I told them to ask her directly. When they did, the motel clerk confirmed she had been using the place for months under several variations of her name. They couldn't defend her after that. She left town to stay with a distant cousin in another state. She lost her job a few weeks later after Tanya's cousin, a senior administrator at the hospital, filed a complaint about unprofessional conduct and unexplained absences. Ruben apologized for days, saying he regretted not telling me sooner. I told him he did exactly what he should have done once things became clear. He and I eventually developed a friendship built on honesty rather than convenience. I sold the house 3 months later. I moved to another city that held no reminders. I never looked for revenge. I never tried to mend things. The situation burned itself clean without my involvement. And Sabrina became a memory that belonged to a life I'd already walked away from.